United States and North Korea and led to vague promises about denuclearization. This time around, analysts were hoping for more tangible progress, but the second summit was cut short after Mr. Trump refused Kim's demands for sanctions relief. The question for our Impact Minds panel today is what happens next? Well, joining me here in the studio is Cindy Yu, a China specialist from Spectator magazine, Dr. Leslie Vinjamuri, head of the US and the Americas program at Chatham House. And joining us from Tufts University in Massachusetts is Sung-Yoon Lee, a professor in Korean studies. Thanks very much all for joining us here on the program. Leslie, I'll come to you first. What's your reaction to this summit appearing to sort of fall apart?
Yeah, it was quite dramatic news to wake up to, in the sense that it felt tremendously anticlimactic, and I think we all felt a bit deflated because there's been so much expectation built up very rapidly around this summit. Unlike the first summit, there was a sense that something really needed to happen. I think there was a lot of concern that Donald Trump would give too much without getting enough back. So I think this was actually not what anybody expected, and it's left us sort of hanging because it's not really clear where one does go next. It looks almost and feels almost like we're moving to a new normal where there's sort of an acceptance that North Korea and its leader are now part of international summit diplomacy with the American president, something that was very important to them, but that this objective of denuclearization is, very far off in the distant future, if at all.
Cindy, I mean, President Trump made the point there that had I come out of this summit with a bad deal, you would have accused me of putting together a bad deal. Best that I walk away from something like this. I mean, do you agree with that?
I actually do completely agree with Trump on this, which is probably the only time I ever say that. But, you look at what the North Korean demands were. It was the lifting of all sanctions. Now, those are sanctions layered and after layered over many, many years. And in reaction to a lot of nuclear tests and repeatedly going against what North Korea agreed on nuclear disarmament. So, the sanctions can't be lifted out overnight. And for North Korea to have demanded that, there was no way President Trump could have accepted that, especially given the domestic situation in America at the moment. He definitely would have been picked up on that one.
Let's bring in Sung-Yoon. I mean, just your reaction to all of this. Has this become the new normal now, that North Korea becomes part of international diplomacy?
Well, this is very uncommon, for a summit to break down like this, for the two principals to walk away without a scheduled joint statement, without signing it. But if we say that this is unconventional or Trump is unpredictable, well, after a consistent pattern of unpredictability, it becomes the norm. I'm not surprised Trump did this, and I give him credit for not committing himself to a bad deal. All indications before coming to Vietnam were that Trump would give away the farm and more in return for allowing Kim to sell him the same horse thrice now, the Yongbyon reactor. It's been frozen on 2 different occasions in the past. So good for now. However, we have seen President Trump last May, for example, write a discourteous letter to Kim Jong-un canceling the Singapore summit and then overnight changing his mind. So the status quo remains. The risks are there. Kim simply overreached, pushed Trump too hard, but Kim will dangle before Trump more sweet carrots, and the temptation to bite and make history will linger.
But that's the point, isn't it, Leslie, that no deal is better than a bad deal, frankly, which is something that Trump has said right from the very beginning. I'm willing to walk away, and he's done that now.
Yeah, no deal's better than a bad deal, but let's remember 2 things. First of all, it's not clear that there needed to be a second summit in order to get no deal. If the pre-summit diplomacy had taken place in the way that it normally would, it would have been clear.
But that's the thing. This is sort of not the normal, isn't it?
It's not the normal, but it's very costly, and it's also costly in terms of what it's given away. Remember that the very important thing for the North Korean leader is to have this legitimacy of a summit. It's very public. It's very international. It's taken everybody's attention. So it's a very significant give. So it's not a neutral. To say it's not that it's no deal is true, but he's gotten the legitimacy of a summit. He's also been given a free pass, right? Because as we know, President Trump traveled to Vietnam and said nothing about North Korea's human rights record, possibly even worse, so giving Kim a pass on the student who was killed. So I think the gives are actually bigger than just saying that it's neutral and no deal. The fact of the summit itself is actually a very significant thing.
And Cindy, I mean, China would be sitting, watching and observing all of this. How do you think they would be reacting to this now?
Well, so interestingly, like last year's summit as well, Kim went to Beijing first before meeting Trump this year. So China has a very active but background role in all of this. And actually, China's trying to have its cake and eat it too. China likes exactly where North Korea is going at the moment. So not giving away their nuclear weapons, but at the same time not giving too much away so that they are increasing their nuclear weapons. So that what China wants is an independent North Korea who is not friendly with America, but actually for the peninsula situation to be stable enough that we're not on the verge of nuclear war. And so I think this actually works in China's favor. So any pending process works in China's favor on this.
Sung-Yoon, do you agree with Leslie that this is in some way emboldened the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un?
Well, I think he probably feels let down, taken aback, because over the past 60 years, in my estimation, it's almost always been North Korea calling the shots. And I know that's very hard to imagine, to accept, especially for Americans looking at this small backward nation, that North Korea has been actually wielding the carrot and stick vis-a-vis the mighty US. But I would make that argument. And now, twice in less than 1 year, it's the US, Donald Trump, playing hard to get. And again, that could unravel anytime, maybe even tomorrow. But for now, Kim will regroup. Team Kim will approach Team America with another sweetener and make an illusory concession like pledging to open up another nuclear or missile facility, while there are other facilities that enrich uranium at full speed. So, 2 steps forward and 1 step back for Kim is still progress, and the temptation will be there to take the bait.
But certainly to the North Korean people, this is not how Kim Jong-un and his regime will be selling it.
No, of course, Kim Jong-un has an incentive, as does Donald Trump, to put a positive spin on it. Not to say the talks just fell apart, but they will resume talks at the appropriate time and that they made progress. And there's some truth in that. Sure, but Kim will, I think, behave, that is, moderate his behavior and refrain from provocations, because he has much to gain, more to gain than Trump does by behaving and being accepted as a legitimate, even a responsible steward of Gulag nation and a nuclear nation. By meeting with Putin, which he will, and by meeting with the Japanese Prime Minister, which he will, by meeting again with Xi Jinping and the South Korean president and so on, Kim will continue to legitimate his own image and be accepted. Perhaps he'll even send his secret weapon, the sanctions-busting, smiles-flashing royal sister, Kim Yo-jong, to the White House or to the UNGA General Assembly. There are many options for Kim before he goes back to his phase of provocations.
And isn't that a good thing, Leslie, that we are now no longer where we were 6 to 8 months ago, where it seemed like, we were on the brink of war, that perhaps Donald Trump has managed to maneuver Kim Jong-un and bring him to a place where he doesn't want to be provocative?
Well, I think there are a couple of things there. First of all, let's not underestimate the role of South Korea in moving things to the position where they are. So credit where credit is due. Undoubtedly, we're in a more stable place than we were when President Trump came into office for a multitude of reasons. But let's not forget the basic fact, right? North Korea remains a very significant nuclear power. There's no change on that. There is a degree of regional stability. And of course, North Korea and Kim will seek to move forward on the lifting of sanctions through a variety of mechanisms, because it now has the platform to engage in diplomacy in a more forthright way. It's not necessarily more stable and better if you actually live in North Korea. And it's still deeply unsettling if you're Japan. So I think there are a number of questions on the table. But this summit, I think, again, wasn't really necessary to get us to where we are now. And it's been tremendously costly.
I was just going to say that Leslie is completely right, that the summit has been very poorly organised. You know, as late as a month ago, we didn't know if the summit would happen, where it would happen, when it would happen. All we knew was that Kim had gone to see President Xi, so we thought something was going to happen. You know, there was no reason to do a summit so last minute and to discuss very little at all. It seems like President Trump couldn't really decide what he wanted from Kim, and he should have expected Kim to have pushed hard on sanction lifting. So what was Trump's response? He should have planned that already before going in.
Sung-Yoon, I mean, isn't it a good thing, though, perhaps, that however, you know, the two leaders react to this and whether there has been some face-saving or humiliation on both sides or not, it will now go back to the working groups to try and find or create a model where, you know, there can be more progress on this?
I would actually say not really, because diplomacy certainly is better than war, but I don't believe that we were on the brink of war through that year-long bluster barrage of 2017. We have seen this kind of seemingly crazy, provocative behavior from North Korea. North Korea raised the stakes and then turned dramatically, changed the tune from molto agitato to placido in 2018, and I believe it was all preordained. I've seen this movie before under his father, Kim Jong-il, in 2000. So there are risks to being engaged by North Korea in drawn-out, protracted negotiation process without reaching a resolution, because Kim, the regime, is able to buy more time and money in the form of lax sanctions enforcement that we've seen since 2018, with which to further advance his nuclear capabilities, to perfect his own nuclear posture review. You know, diplomacy, when it works, is great, but there are risks, costs that accompany drawn-out diplomacy.
Do you think that the North Korean leader was playing a game here with Donald Trump?
Oh, yes. I mean, North Korea has been playing this game since the very early days of the founding of the despotic People's Republic of Korea. Many people remember that Kim Il-sung, the founder and the grandfather, started the Korean War by invading the South in June 1950. Most people don't remember that in the days leading up to the actual invasion on June 25th, for example, on June 7th and June 19th, Kim Il-sung proposed a detailed plan to the South for setting up a joint inter-Korean parliament with specific dates for meetings in North Korea and South Korea, specific venues, and so on. Even on June 19th, that would be 6 days before this full-scale, large-scale invasion. So strategic deception, blatant lying, that's what North Korea has really cultivated to an art form, and Kim will use that again to try to ensnare President Trump further in this protracted labyrinthian process of negotiations.
So to go back to our main question then, Leslie, what next? What are the options? You know, there's no question or there's no sort of discussion here about a third summit, but what do they do now?
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear that nobody really wants to see, or hopefully nobody wants to see a third summit, as tempting as it might be, I think, for President Trump in certain dimensions. But this hasn't gone especially well. But I think, you know, there is a bigger question as to whether, despite, of course, the United States will hold on to that stated and very publicly stated objective of denuclearization, whether the focus might be gradually shifting towards really looking at the new normal, which means that America's in it for containment, for deterrence, and for normalizing, to the extent that we've seen already, North Korea as a different kind of state, but a state that is not likely to get rid of its nuclear weapons.
And just briefly, Cindy, where does this leave China? Because if what Leslie is saying, that the United States would be looking at just containment, is that something China would support?
I think so, actually. China would support containment. What China doesn't want is regime change, and violent regime change at that. So if it's containment that keeps stability, if it's containment that allows North Korea to keep its nuclear weapons, then China would support that.
Sung-Yoon and Leslie, as well as Cindy, thank you all for joining us here on the program.